conversation hosted by Alex Resvan Viennet.
Hello and welcome to another 5 Things Friday, 5 times Friday. Today, as it's Friday and it's Friday afternoon here in Europe and morning in the US, we have a special guest. And Tijno, who will introduce himself in a minute, has been someone that I've admired for a long, long time, just because of being a visionary when it comes to him and his customers and retail and what he's thought about and the types of projects that we worked on together early on in our careers. I think without any further ado, let me introduce Tijno Visser Hooft from Verizon. Hey, Tijno.
Good morning, Ali. Good afternoon, actually.
Yeah,
doing well.
Okay. Yeah, I can see it's sunny. Is it sunny in Minneapolis?
Yes, it still is. So the big question is, when is snow going to hit? Is always the big question over here in Minneapolis, because from a Celsius perspective, it can be minus 40 degrees here in winter, and sometimes the winter stays all the way until April. So it's for now we'll take the sun. It's 27 degrees today, so I'll take it.
I'm hoping out of the 5 things that we're going to go through, is the Mike Mac one of them? Because if it's not, it's a great opportunity to say, are these the Minneapolis summers that he wants to retire for?
Let's make that one of the 5 then. Yes.
Yeah. Well, listen, if you don't know, the hot news of actually last week, it was that Mike McNamara, CIO and friend to many, is stepping down next year to spend and enjoy more Minnesotan summers or Minneapolis summers. So you guys must have amazing summers if you're making the CIO of one of the largest retailers in the US retire.
We do. We have like all 4 seasons over here. We have an amazing spring, amazing fall, with all the foliage outside. It's going to start somewhere soon, like in a week or so. All the trees are still green, but then they become yellow and red. It's really beautiful. And then the harsh winters, and then great spring again, and then it's summer. And summer is the state of the 1,000 lakes. So we spend our time on the lakes, on boats, jet skis, water skis, all that stuff. So I understand that people stay here, and I think actually I read an article yesterday that for 50 plus, it's the best state after Orlando.
Right.
The best city actually after Orlando to live in. From
even with the cold.
Yes, because
what people do is during the winter.
That's why we need spring break. We need spring break to warm up again.
Okay. Well, listen, it's 10, 12, 15-minute max deep dive. We're going to get a US version today from you. Maybe before we start, why don't you just give us a headline on what you do, what's your day job, what you spend what keeps you busy during the week?
Yeah. So right now I work for Verizon. I've been with Verizon over 10 years. Most of the time within Verizon, I've worked in the retail environment. So I worked on some accounts in Europe, Tesco's being one of them. And then Mike McNamara moved from Tesco's over to Target, and that's when I then followed them along together with Tom Kadalec, and we replicated what we did with Tesco's for Target, and then after Target, I led a large cluster of retail, travel, and hospitality for Verizon, spanning from Minneapolis all the way to New York. Had some fashion in there as well, the Ohio cluster of fashion. Had lots of grocers in there as well, and I led that cluster right into COVID, which was interesting because I had an airline company in there as well. So they were hit the hardest first, and then the word that I didn't know in my vocabulary was furlough. So that was a word I learned the hard way with all the customers that I was leading, and we were just looking at how can we help our customers throughout this crisis. Where some of the customers were having booming business, like Target, their stores were being, they saw like peak every day of COVID, and they were extremely dependent on their partners. Post that, I was asked to lead one of the largest, latest acquisitions that Verizon has, which is retail/pharma clients. So that's what I'm spending my time on right now.
I'm smiling because we have another esteemed colleague, Simon Kettle, who's joined the stream. Hello, Simon. I knew having you on the show will attract the big guns, and thanks to you, now we have Simon, a big Simon again, another fantastic colleague I had the great pleasure of working with many moons ago. But again, real forward thinkers.
I remember the time that the three of us were actually at NRF.
Yeah, God. Hopefully, fingers crossed, the whatever laws allowing there will be a physical NRF in January. Yeah. But listen, Tijno, we've already 6 minutes have flown past. So why don't we get into your number one highlight or?
Yeah. Well, let's start with the one that we started with, Mike McNamara leaving Target. Okay. He's been here for more than 5. Hence, I've been here for more than 5 years in Minneapolis. He's the work that he's done with Target is phenomenal, right? Without the work he has done, Target wouldn't have been where they are right now from a corporate perspective, from a stock price perspective, from how they were able to respond to COVID perspective. So he did phenomenal work at Target. So I understand after 5 years, if you leave, why don't you leave at the high point, right? So this definitely is the high point from a Target perspective. So is he going to spend his summers in Minneapolis? To be seen. What I asked him is, okay, you're going to do one more peak season. What about one more NRF, please? Because too many fond memories of Mike Mack and his team, wherever it was at NRF, always exec briefing sessions during NRF, some of the best restaurants that we went to during NRF, the Hyatt drink session at NRF. I really would like to have one more NRF with Mike if I could.
Yeah, I think the bigger sort of commentary in the US that we talked about is the fact that here you have a laggard from a technology perspective 6 years ago, retailer, grocer, big box, and then how one person with the right, no BS attitude, crack on, minimize, simplify, bring everything in-house. And I'll sit on the fence on this, right? In the sense of retailers becoming technology vendors is a whole nother conversation, right? That's a whole nother sort of area to get into. But I think he will definitely be remembered for all of the great projects and diversity that he focused on, and Target's brilliant sort of focus on making sure they have a diverse environment. So what do you think in terms of his replacement? Where do you think that will come from?
Hard to say. Hard to say. I think it's going to be, and that's what the press is saying as well, right? It will be very difficult to step in his shoes. Is it going to be an external candidate? Is it going to be a former Target employee that's going to return, or is it going to be an external candidate? If you're going to go external, definitely not from retail. It will be technologist from a technology company. That's the most of the recruits that they've done lately. So, it's going to be interesting to see, who they're going to go for. I think I have a gut feel, but I won't share it right here. I'll let you know.
To me yet? Don't worry.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, number 2. What's in at number 2 for you?
So reading up a couple things that caught my interest. It was like an article that I read about Burlington Coat Factory, actually one of my former customers as well. They announced that their supply chain costs have increased by 78%. And supply chain cost, because of COVID, because of cost of shipping, all that stuff is it's exaggerating the environment over here, at least in the stateside. When we had the Evergreen stuck in the Suez Canal as well, suddenly the entire supply chain of the world fell to pieces. So it caught my interest to see how can supply how the increase of supply chain is going to impact retail overall. I then read a quick article yesterday in Bloomberg that IKEA is having the exact same issue, and actually they're leasing their own ships right now. because they no longer want to be dependent on the large shipping companies, because their stores right now are at least some of their stores have 10% less of a stock level, simply because of these supply chain issues. So that caught my eye, and I thought it was interesting to see, because ultimately cost of supply chain increase can only lead to one thing, which is cost of increase of cost to the consumer.
Yeah, I mean, and if that drives inflation and hyperinflation and but what's interesting here in Europe and specifically in the UK, we faced a supply chain challenge, and we've had leaders of M&S and lots of other retailers saying that there is a shortage of drivers, and in the supply chain there is a shortage in general of workers, which again has led to higher wages for the staff that they do have, which then we do expect to come in. So it's interesting. I mean, even in the news, it was reported that, some of this had an impact on Morrison's, on Asda's quarterly profits due to the high increase to the supply chain. So I think it is an area, and it is such a, whether it's the front end demand chain or the back end true supply chain. And IKEA becoming a logistics company, we've seen it with Amazon. Next, IKEA won't be a home furnishing; it'll be a logistics company outsourcing it to other retailers. But okay, what do we have at number 2?
Well, yeah, maybe the number 2 might then be something that we see here in the U.S., which is labor, cost of labor increasing, right? So all the retailers are basically saying $15 is we're slowly moving towards the $15 per hour. Largely triggered by the stimulus checks that have landed here as well, and whereby it's very hard to get labor. And on top of that, people are changing jobs a lot right now. So how to attract and retain your talent should be on top of mind of all companies, not only retail. But I think that that on top of the supply chain cost is going to further increase prices that we're going to pay. Anyway, so that way I squeezed a third one in there because I was short on 2.
You didn't do your homework, and you're trying to inflate them as we go along to get to 5.
Maybe I'll do 6. Who knows?
So the 6th thing Friday doesn't flow as well. We've got to
5 things.
Interesting point just on that, and we haven't talked about this. But again, there was an article in Retail Week this week about the great exodus from workers in retail during COVID. They've rethought their careers and have decided to move out and do other things. And maybe wage cost or wage pressures are one aspect to be. But keeping your staff and growing your staff, I think, are definite themes that are going to stay. And it's quite interesting for me that you have the same sort of interpretation, maybe in a different way than we have here in the UK specifically. So what's number 3 for you?
Yeah. Well, just quick one on retaining your staff. One of the things that lots of companies are doing right here is helping you pay for your student loans. So that's something that Target has done. That's something that some of the other companies are doing right now. I think even Amazon has put an announcement out that they're paying for student debt, or actually anything related to your university degree that you obtain. So that might be another way to retain. I think it's number 4 if I'm counting right. But anyway,
does that mean you've only got one other after number 4?
No, well, yeah. The thing I read is it relates to large brands going D2C, right? Direct to consumer. Nike did a massive announcement a while ago that they were going to go out of a number of stores because they're going to focus more on their own store and go direct to consumer. The moment they did, everybody went out of Nike from a stock perspective because they said, you guys are crazy. But anybody that follows Nike lately is seeing that they made the right decision, right? So I didn't want to talk about Nike. I want to talk about another brand that I love because I've always been into the experiential retail side of the house, which is Canada Goose. So Canada Goose just announced that they are doing the same. So their stock has tanked as well. And one of the key reasons why it tanked is because the downside for Canada Goose is they sell their products, when the Minnesotan winter starts, right? Because you don't need a Canada Goose jacket when it's 40 degrees outside. You need the Canada Goose jacket when it's minus 25 here in Minneapolis. Actually, it was one of the first things I bought, by the way, when I heard you're going to go to Minneapolis. The downside is of direct to consumer is that you're going to do most of your sales towards the end of the year. Yeah. Where all your everybody that's a shareholder wants to see sales in all the quarters of the year, not only in the fourth. And that's the downside that the Canada Goose is now going to see, because all the stores were placing their orders throughout the year to be able to have enough stock levels to sell them during the last quarter of the year. Now, if you're going to go full D2C, it means that you're going to do almost all your sales in one quarter.
Yeah, I think so. D2C, I think, has been a buzzword that a lot of pundits, myself, have used when they're talking about retail. But there's a couple of things that people are finding out, that you're changing your business model and the profit formula from going direct to the consumer in terms of advertising, in terms of understanding your customer, in terms of actually being able to build a relationship with the end user customer when you've been so reliant on your third parties, are actually big areas. This week, I had the pleasure of being on a panel where we were talking to e-commerce directors, and everyone was sharing their problems. And it was like, okay, but we don't want to do personalization, or how do we do personalization more in this new world, right? Because our cost of advertising, the model has to change to support this new way of working. And it was interesting because then we got into offers can't be, that you can't keep discounting and cannibalizing your own margins to win new customers. And ultimately, the answer is better data, better understanding of your customers. But for retailers, and specifically for e-commerce directors or leaders, it's incredibly difficult, because then that's another part of the business that they're heavily reliant on to help them get to build the D2C model. And another area where the cost element, which goes to wages, is dark stores, right? Where if you're doing direct to consumer, you create your dark store, which then becomes your advertising fulfillment area. But then creating them needs different wage structures, because are you going to choose pickers from your factory? They've got a different salary profile to the store worker, which again, in the US, I remember that being actually quite an interesting sort of, which way do I go? Do I bring my factory workers and get them to do it? Or do I, my expensive store workers? So anyway, it's an interesting perspective. Do you have another one, or
yes?
Should I? Okay, go ahead. Go for it.
Yeah, and why I love Canada Goose is, from an experiential retail perspective, they went into the store format themselves, right? Their own store format, where they put a cooling cell into the store, so you could experience what is it to be in a Minnesotan winter during summer, actually. And you put on one of the coats and see if it works. And that's how you build brand affinity. And then you were able to source it, whether you wanted in the store or online. They didn't really care. But now going to full D2C may mean they're going to be out of Nordstrom's, and no longer will sell through Nordstrom's. Will only sell through their own channel. Who knows? But I thought it was interesting to see that Canada Goose is trying to follow the same Nike model. Last one. Which is, it has always been like hot in grocery, is the time it takes for you to get your products, right? And when we were working with Tesco's, it went from how can we get for 48 hours to 24 hours to 4 hours delivery time to maybe within an hour. Nowadays, we have this new trend called hyper fast delivery, which is within 10 to 15 minutes. Clearly here in the US, I'm not seeing it as much yet, simply because the distance, the distance issue. But I'm seeing this in Amsterdam right now, where companies like Gorillas is basically delivering a couple of goods, not a whole lot, but it's the like ice cream, it's a toothbrush, it's things like that, like a banana, and they're delivering it within 15 minutes. From you placing the order to getting it 15 minutes. And the question is, who then uses it? Who needs it? And how do you get your supply chain to work like that? Yeah. On top of that, I just read an article yesterday that Kroger is now going actually to Florida, but they're not opening physical stores. They're just putting a distribution center, what they call a spoke site, in Florida, which kind of like is a dark store that then only runs online. What if retailers are just going to put dark stores in the middle of urban areas and then use these guerrilla-like companies to do hyper-fast delivery on top of the produce that they have? So I'm always interested to see, how can you go? To me, it was how can you go from 4 hours to 1 hour, but now the 1 hour has already become 15 minutes.
It's always a danger when you have a wonderful speaker like yourself that all of a sudden we're at 21 minutes. We're only going to do 10 to 15 minutes, which is fine.
Sorry,
I mean, in the biggest unicorns in the world will be the last mile delivery guys, because every single region from the UK to Amsterdam, across the whole of Europe, we've seen the rise of these last mile fulfillment because they're getting ready for this wave of what you're saying. What was it? Hyper fast. Hyper fast. Must be hyper fast. So anyway, to do the hyper fast. So listen, we're at time. My only thing is next Tuesday, I'll be speaking at the Samsung event in King's Cross. If you are in London and if you want to fly over, please come along and say hi. It's on my LinkedIn feed. If you want to register, you can watch it online, Tijno. I know you're going to be staying up to watch it, but I wanted to thank you so much for joining us. Any final words before we close today's 5 Things Friday?
Well, first of all, if it's King's Cross, is it going to be at track 9 3/4?
Yeah, Harry Potter. What do you mean?
No, listen, I know it because I always took the train from there to the lovely Welling Garden.
I know.
So I know it. Well, no, thank you for having me. I love retail. I love following all the trends, and I love listening to your podcast. So thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure.
Take care.